This is Brett with Colin's Garage. Today, good day, we're gonna go over the BMW 2JZ, 1JZ adaptation plate, or kit for that matter. So we're gonna go over the 1JZ, 2JZ adaptation kit to put a ZF or a Getrag box into whatever chassis you wanna put it into. Getrag, ZF. If you look, they have really similar features except for input shaft. Features are different. Anyway, here we go. First things first, we're gonna take the adapter plate, unwrap it, unwrap the flywheel. Your package should come with 2JZ or JZ adapter plate bolt kit, your ZF or Getrag bolt kit, flywheel bolts, and your pilot bearing adapter, along with the flywheel and the adapter plate. Not to mention instructions for both flywheel and the adapter plate. And some cool stickers too. Feel free to put those on whatever you want. Make sure you wear the proper safety gear before doing anything. Here we are. Unwrapped. If you notice, there's a few key features in this adapter plate that make it pretty unique. We have dowel pins right here to keep the transmission concentric with the engine. We also have starter relief and a centering pin hole up here to make this a very easy swap to kind of install and to make sure it's very concentric. It actually is a really tight fit. So let's go ahead and put it on. I'm gonna go ahead and put that on to the engine and get that going for you real quick. All right, most importantly is your safety. Make sure you wear the appropriate safety gear to kind of not jeopardize your safety whatsoever. So first things first, there's gonna be dowel pins right here and here. Make sure they're clean and free of rust before starting this process. Since we engineered the adapter plate to fit really tight on these pieces, you wanna make sure that they're very nice and clean. So at the very least, clean them off. If there's rust on them, take a little bit of sandpaper and knock the sandpaper, or knock the rust off of these dowel pins sticking out of the engine. Ours are pretty decent and don't need to be sanded. Second step, go ahead and put the adapter plate onto the engine. This might require you to move your EGR, or your coolant crossover tube up just very slightly. You can do this with your hand, but nevertheless, very slight movement going up. You can see right here, they line up. Might need to slightly hammer those in to get that to fit properly. So we're going to grab a dead blow or a plastic hammer to not mar up the adapter plate. Just lightly tap evenly on both sides. Once you hear a loud clapping noise, you know it's fully against the engine. Good to go. Next step, go ahead and make sure you got everything kind of lined up with respect to your holes and whatnot. Everything should be extremely precise. So we'll go ahead and zoom in on that a little bit. If you can see down there. As you can see here, all the holes are lining up really nice. Let me see if I can zoom in. There we go. Got the focus to work right. Spot on with the holes. It's perfect. Very precise. Another thing we do is we machine the inside radius of this adapter plate, or inside diameter of this adapter plate, such that we have a really good concise fit with the flywheel, to make sure nothing touches or hits or anything like that due to thermal expansion. Next step after the adapter plate installation, we're going to go ahead and bolt the adapter plate on using the bolt kit that we have here. It is recommended to use Loctite on all the threads of these fasteners to make sure they don't come out. So we have a nice blue Loctite for the adapter plate fasteners. You simply apply it just by, it's actually similar to like a glue stick. This is like a paste almost instead of the liquid. So you put the Loctite onto the tip of the threads where it needs to go, and then thread it into a hole in the block. This almost guarantees that it's not going to come out due to vibration or anything unnecessary like that. Torque wrench, you're going to need this. So the large Allen keys are essentially a number 10. I don't know if you can see this correctly. Number 10 Allen key. It's kind of a bigger Allen key, very large. The second set's going to be a number 8. Just tighten these on in a star pattern. Okay, that does it for the M12 fasteners. We're going to move on to the M10 fasteners. These 5 fasteners up here are M12 by 1.25 thread pitch. It's a socket head cap screw you can find at Lowe's or Home Depot or anything like that, but the fine thread, the fine pitch, makes it kind of difficult to find locally. So if you can't find it locally, or if you lose one, you can contact us, or you can simply go on McMaster.com and get those off of McMaster.com. Again, M12 socket head cap screw, 1.25 thread pitch. Here are the next bolts, the next fasteners. This is a M10 by 1.25 socket head cap screw. I don't know if you can see in there. It's a number 8 socket. Again, don't forget the Loctite on each fastener. Loctite's important just in case the fasteners succumb to a lot of vibration. You want to make sure that the fastener doesn't back itself out during racing conditions or anything of that nature. Even street conditions are succumb to a lot of vibration. You want to be very careful when working with an engine on an engine stand. Make sure everything's secured and held up properly. Make sure your hydraulic cylinder is not leaking or anything like that. That could cause a major safety issue. Again, if you're not comfortable doing any of this stuff, I highly recommend getting it done by a professional at a professional shop. Don't be afraid to do that, as this stuff could be dangerous and could cause a lot of harm if done improperly. So make sure you take the proper steps to assemble everything according to the instructions and using proper mechanical knowledge when doing this. If you're not comfortable doing it, get a professional to do it. It's my first and foremost recommendation. So these are down here. These M10 by 1.25 socket head cap screws are down at the bottom of the oil pan. One of the last things, we have the nut and M10 socket head cap screw going through this left portion of the oil pan right here. Again, never forget your Loctite. And this nut just simply goes onto the backside. It's an M10 by 1.25 nut. Everything's grade 10.9 on this vehicle, on all of our stuff, with the exception of the flywheel bolts. Those fasteners are to a higher standard and made specifically for being, flywheel. Something very important to note: there's 2 different types of nuts. There's a fine thread nut, and then there's a coarse thread nut. Something to note: the last fastener we're going to install, besides the starter fasteners, this is the fastener going into the lower left-hand corner of the oil pan. In the bag, there's 2 different types of nuts. There's a coarse thread nut. I don't know if you can see that or not. There's a coarse thread nut, and then there's a fine thread nut. The coarse nut is for the starter. The fine thread nut is for this lower oil pan piece right here. You want to make sure you test the nuts on the fastener before installing them. Now you want to make sure you can get the threads all the way through. If it starts and it's very hard to kind of fasten on or thread on, then it definitely does not go there. It's used for the other fastener. Alright, now that we got the majority of the fasteners in the adapter plate, we're good to go to put on the starter studs. These starter studs are very, very precision studs. They're self-aligning studs, and they're a specific length to go completely through your JZ starter. And what you do is you drill out the threads on your JZ starter to where when you go to slide the starter over the studs, you have a means of removing the starter while the adapter plate and transmission are in the vehicle. If you don't do this, essentially you have to take the transmission and everything out and apart in order to take the starter off of the vehicle, which is very horribly inconvenient, especially at the track if you have a starter failure. So first things first, you want to start with the small side. You want to start with the small side of the stud going into the adapter plate. You want to come through the engine into the adapter plate, thread it on with your fingers. Don't forget to put Loctite on this side. Loctite on this side as well. I'm going to thread these in on the back side going in through. Don't forget to put the Loctite on until they're nice and snug. Next step is drill out. If you read the instructions, it says to drill out the starter with a 15-30 seconds drill bit in order to get the threads free so it can clear the M10 fastener going through the other side. 15-30 seconds right there. We're going to use that one. This is the one. Okay, we are ready to drill, safety first, the starter threads out of your JZ starter. Here is a starter off of a 2JZ GTE VVTi engine. You can use a starter from any 2JZ. It could be a GE, from a IS300, SC300, GS300, any model that came with a 2JZ, GE or GTE, similar to this one here, will work. So the difference is it's a lot larger, has an open face. I keep getting a lot of emails on why we can't use the 1JZ starter on these kits, especially the adapter plate flywheel combo kits. If you see here, there's a large snout that comes out to hold the starter gear centered in the 1JZ system. Also, the actual starter motor is linear with the gear, so the solenoid essentially pulls out the gear, solenoid, starter motor, gear, starter gear right here, and that essentially comes out when you excite the starter and protrudes the starter gear into the area where the flywheel ring gear is, so it can start turning the engine over to start the vehicle. If you look at the 2JZ starter motor is here, and the solenoid is actually here. So it's a little bit different of a design, and this open face allows it to run with many different flywheels, which is why we kind of designed this kit to work specifically with that. Safety first, eyeglasses, hand protection, sometimes ear protection when you're doing something really loud. 15-30 seconds drill bit, large enough arbor to kind of hold it, or chuck, whatever you want to call it. Just simply go perpendicular to the face or normal to the face of the starter, and just lightly, with light pressure, kind of go down. Until you go all the way through. You want to make sure you get a good clean hole. As you finish, the finished product should have a mill finish to it, but nevertheless should be able to accept an M10 fastener. M10 fastener goes right through. Starter is now ready for installation. Holes, studs, Loctite, everything's in there. Just go ahead and slide your already drilled starter into the holes and thread this on right here. These are N10 by 1.5 thread pitch nuts going on to those self-lining studs. Again, 17 millimeter, decently large, but works really well for what it is. Again, safety is absolutely key to doing anything in the garage. Make sure you're working in a safe environment. If you're not confident doing something, by all means, get a professional. It's not embarrassing. It's just about your safety. So do the right thing. With the Loctite, firmly tighten that on, and you won't have any issues. It won't loosen due to vibration or anything of that nature. Next up, we unbag the flywheel. You want to avoid touching the friction surface with greasy gloves or anything like that. The friction surface is the black or dark colored part on the front side of the flywheel. Essentially, this flywheel has a desiccant in the box, in the bag, and that got squished and came apart. But what you're looking at is a deep dish flywheel, single piece, that works with the JZ engine. With that being said, a single piece flywheel is always going to have a light amount of vibration to it when on an engine that typically comes with a dual mass flywheel. The single mass flywheel is going to cause a little bit of a rattling noise, or a little bit of what they call chatter, clutch chatter in the drivetrain. This is not uncommon with non-dual mass flywheels on engines that do come with dual mass flywheels. But this is nothing to kind of be worried about, and it doesn't really significantly affect the performance of the engine whatsoever, or the transmission. It just makes it a little bit louder and noisier for the customer. And just to save the questions, we are not going to be producing a dual mass flywheel for this system, or any system for that matter. Next thing we have is the pilot bearing adapter. This gets pressed into the crank boss here. The crank boss, it'll go in. There'll be a minute gap between the end shoulder of the pilot bearing adapter and the edge of the crank boss. This is to extend out to help keep the flywheel down here concentric. What you want to do is make sure that this fits good before installation, as it is machined very, very tightly, tight tolerance. You can see ours goes in and out very nicely. Very tight. If you ever score up the edge of the pilot bearing adapter, it won't actually slip over the flywheel, since this is such a tight fit. In that case, take a light piece of sandpaper around the circumference of the outside diameter of this shoulder. Next up, we're going to go ahead and we're going to insert the pilot bearing adapter. Insert the pilot bearing adapter into the engine. You want to make sure you use a rubber mallet or a dead blow, or if you don't have either one of those, a piece of wood over top of the edge of the pilot bearing will be sufficient to kind of press that in. But essentially you want to make sure it's really nice and square before starting to insert this. And this is a press fit bushing adapter. So again, make sure it's nice and square before really hammering it in there. Once you get it started, very light taps to get started. Check all the way around to make sure it's nice and square. That's pretty decent right there. So as you get it nice and square, proceed to hammer it in. Decent force. And again, you're going to feel it kind of bounce back. The hammer will bounce back once you bottom the pilot bushing adapter all the way in. Slight gap right here. This is intended. by design. The way to stick this out, it keeps this boss right here centering the flywheel when fastening this in. This is very important to make sure it stays concentric and you don't get any vibrations or anything like that. So these flywheel bolts are very specific. They're made by ARP. So if you look here, you want to double check, make sure the length is correct. You should have sufficient amount sticking through the other side. One of the last steps is installing the flywheel. Make sure this surface is really clean right here. Also this surface, you want to make sure there's no bumps or anything to cause the flywheel to be not sitting perfectly flat on the piece. If you have to take a piece of sandpaper, just very lightly, make sure it's a real high grit, and kind of, you know, scratch down the parts that are high, or if there's some grime or rust on there, you want to knock that off before putting this on. This is a very critical piece. It can't be more than 1.5 thousandths of distortion when rotating to prevent any type of clutch misalignment or anything of that nature. So now, with that being said, just go ahead and slide this on over the pilot bearing adapter. Be very careful not to nick the pilot bearing adapter in the process. Like, again, this is a very tight fit piece here. So now that we have that on, again, the pilot bushing adapter keeps this whole piece completely concentric, and it's very vital to the adaptation process. Now, as you can see, mine is hanging there. You don't want to do that because this could fall and damage the flywheel, but you want to make sure that it fits on nice and snug before putting your Loctite on your fasteners and starting the fastening process. So we're just going to get 2 in there to hold it down just for right now. Next step is your flywheel bolts. You want to use your Loctite. I recommend a Loctite Red. I think it's in the instructions. Loctite 242, which is a really strong anaerobic sealant. Essentially, when you deprive Loctite of oxygen, it creates a really strong bond, similar to super glue. They're both anaerobic sealants. You want to make sure you get it nice and coated. You want to put this on all the fasteners before throwing that in there. Make sure these are nice and clean. You want to put some oil underneath the head of the fastener as well, so we can get a good torque rating on this setup. Got an oil can here. Loctite, oil underneath the head. We're going to take these out since we just use these to position it, and we're going to prep these with Loctite and oil as well. Next step is tightening these down. We have a 12mm socket. 12mm socket. We have our torque wrench. We're going to set our torque wrench value at 56 foot-pounds at the final torque. The initial torque rating is going to be 20 foot-pounds. I'm going to go ahead and tighten that up to 20 foot-pounds so you can see it. We're going to do this in 20-pound increments, alternating and adjacent in a star pattern, essentially. It doesn't have to be exactly 20 foot-pounds. You just want to do this evenly all across the board. This process will take quite some time, so just take your time and be patient with it. Again, you're going to want to go across and then like a star pattern until you're completely torqued down to your 20 foot-pounds. You want to move it until you hear the wrench ratchet just like that. And we have the front of the crank kind of locked to where it's not going anywhere. Now that we got the first step down, tighten it up to 40 foot-pounds. Also, make sure you're operating in pound-feet, foot-pound force on your torque wrench. Sometimes it's in Newton meters or another measurement of force. It's extremely critical to make sure that it's in foot-pound force, which would be FT, LB, F. And with the oil underneath the head of the fastener, it guarantees that it gets a good even torque with the fastener. Next step, last step, is going to be your 56 foot-pounds. 56 foot-pounds is the final torque step. rating on these. Just double check your torque to make sure you have it on there properly. Okay, good. Now we have both the flywheel on, pilot bearing adapter on, adapter plate on, properly torqued. We're good to go. Now it's time to put the transmission on. Next step is putting the clutch onto the engine. So you want to make sure you have a clutch alignment tool and get it nice and centered inside the system. We're going to go ahead and show you how to properly torque down the pressure plate bolts and get this kind of fastened on. The clutch that we used last season for a full season, so it's a little bit worn, but still good for exactly what we're doing. Take the pressure plate, fasteners. You need Loctite on these fasteners. These are going to be succumb to a lot of vibration, so put Loctite on, and then put these into the flywheel. 15 pounds for the first increment, and then 30 pounds for the final torque reading on these. So we're going to go up to 15. Second step is going to go up to 30 pounds for their final torque reading, and this will safely torque down the fasteners onto the flywheel. I'm going to remove the alignment tool and go ahead and prep it. Your box is going to come with a bag labeled ZF Trans Bolt Kit. This is going to come with the bolts to bolt on the ZF Trans onto the engine. It's actually so light, you can do it with one person, so I'll just show you again real quick how to do it. Lift it up, one hand underneath, one hand on the tail portion of it. Gently slide it in there. You want to make sure it's in neutral, that way the splines on the input shaft can mesh with the clutch disc. Okay, this is a zoomed in view of the starter gear inside the system here. If you can see, this is basically intake side of the 2JZ engine, and what we're zooming in on is basically where the starter gear kind of protrudes out to engage on the flywheel. And we're gonna go ahead and stuff this into something and see how it looks and check functionality and drive it around. All right, got the slave cylinder in and we are golden. So this swap should be a lot of fun. Stay tuned. The intern and I are jacking up the IS300 to put this VVTi 1J and the BMW transmission combination inside of it. First try. I don't know if you can see it or not. Line right up. Let's see if we can get this in first try. BMW transmission has, so far, a lot of room to spare compared to any other transmission I've seen in here. So, hopeful to say the least. Let's see if we can get this done. Sorry for the poor audio quality. We're recording on a manifold. As you can see, this is our adapter plate right there, and 2J starter, 1JZ VVTi. We're using LQ9 coils on this setup, and definitely a strong vehicle. Like I said, IS300 using a BMW M3 transmission, and it fits so very well. The only negative part is the shifter. Unfortunately, it doesn't line up into that stock hole, as you can see right there. This had an R154 in it before, and As you can see right here, the guy welded up the old hole, but the transmission's so far forward that it's at least, and this is my hand going down, and then I got to go forward just to touch it, maybe like 6 inches. So transmission's pretty far forward, nevertheless. Still definitely a viable solution, and we'll get you more on how we're going to do the shifter and other stuff like that. So, more on that later. Feel free to go to the link below and purchase the kit. It's at collinsadapters.com. If you go under the adaptation kits tab, it's going to be under the 1JZ, 2JZ to BMW adaptation kit. There you can buy the adapt plate and flywheel. I think it's under $1,000 right now, so get it until it'll probably go up here shortly. But get it while we